So just as a quick introduction, my name is Aaron and I'm with Pluto. We actually wrote the code that got branched off and integrated into Linux MCE. Linux MCE is a suite of media center, home entertainment, and smart home applications where you can control everything under one user interface. So it has media functionalities like PVR. It will control your AV devices, turning on and off your TVs and setting all the inputs on your receiver and things like that. It also has a voice over IP telephony built in, home security, which integrates your surveillance cameras and notifies you on your cell phones and so forth, as well as home automation for controlling your lights, climate, pool, other devices. So we put together a very short demo video here, about 5 minutes, that shows you what it's all about. We can go ahead and start the video now. And this shows how Linux MCE has now been integrated into KDE. Whoops. Okay. It'll start in 1 second. Is my mic still? Now, the key thing with Linux MCE is that it is really totally geared towards a home theater application. So when you start it up, you have a wizard to help you get the resolution going and get your audio settings going. And there's a setup wizard that asks you some basic questions to get you going.
So it does not interfere. When you're not watching your own media, daily gallery art from Flickr is displayed, so there is full screen media at all times. I insert a DVD. It plays automatically. I plug in a Windows IR receiver transmitter and use a Windows remote. The start button brings up my menu and all the navigation buttons work as expected. However, Linux MCE's UI was designed to require only 3 buttons to control every device in your home if you have a pointing device. Custom remotes for Linux MCE with the 3-button control are now being sold. You can do the same thing with a keyboard and a mouse, or a gyro mouse. This remote also has traditional navigation buttons if you prefer. But for this demo, I won't use them to prove that all the functions really are accessible with only 3 buttons, plus OK and cancel. Tap Menu to bring up the main menu on top of your media. The remote has a gyro, so moving it moves the pointer on screen. Press OK to choose the highlighted option, or cancel to make whatever menu is on screen go away. Tap Media and move up and down for the skipping action. Chapters on a DVD, channels on a TV, tracks on a CD, etc. Move past the top and bottom of any list to scroll it up or down. You control the scrolling speed by how far you move your hand past the edge. Tap Media and move left and right to control the playback speed. It's like a jog shuttle. The further you move left and right, the faster it goes. Or hold Media and don't let go while you move left and right for absolute positioning to find any scene extremely fast. Turn your hand 45 degrees to the left for the beginning of the movie and 45 degrees right for the end. It's very precise, so you can find any scene. Let go to resume playback. Press the Ambience button and move left and right to adjust the volume.
I shall rend his head from his shoulders. I will
and up and down to adjust the brightness of the lights. The other less common options are accessed by pressing the menu button. The left menu pad changes depending on what media you're using, so for this DVD I can select subtitles and audio tracks.
Une potion?
Adjust the zoom and aspect ratio, etc. The regular IR remote still works at the same time. You can also copy a disc to the hard drive. Start TV. Press the media button and move up and down to skip through channels. When I fly through the guide fast, it's still easy to recognise the rows with icons. Now when I browse the guide, it's easy to spot all the Simpsons episodes. Highlight a channel and move to the right to see the upcoming shows and scroll through the next 2 weeks of programmes. When a show is highlighted, it's one click to record this episode, all episodes, or bookmark the show or channel as a favourite. I'll plug in a network storage drive with previously ripped media. It is plug and play, and all the attributes and cover art are imported and the media is catalogued. The gyro makes navigating long lists of media much faster. Wave your hand to scroll the list instead of hitting page down 100 times. I can also filter, such as only show high-def content, or only disc-based media, or only TV shows or certain genres, or do a keyword search. There are many remote controls you can use with Linux MCE, each with its own advantages. A regular Windows infrared remote, this gyro remote, a gyro mouse, a regular keyboard and mouse, a webpad, a PDA, or a mobile phone. You can do all the same things on all the remotes. All the remotes are always in sync and can be used in parallel. Start a movie with the gyro remote and note that the webpad switches its controls too. And I can browse movies on the webpad too. Linux MCE is a whole house solution that shares all devices and media. So that rack of equipment I just set up can stay in one room, and everywhere else in the house I need only TVs with thin clients. This is very significant in ways you may not expect. Like many newer places, my phone jacks were wired with Cat5, which gets me network for Linux MCE. That's all I need. I get all my entertainment by only attaching a thin client to the back of the monitor. I'll turn it on. Here's the out-of-box experience. Here's my cable box with all the channels. I'll order an on-demand movie. Here are all my videos, including network media and the DVDs in the jukebox. Watch YouTube, check the weather. And one of the best things is that Linux MCE keeps track of each remote control individually. So if you start media and want to move, take the remote and press Follow Me.
Step back, ladies. I'm going to ask one of these workers to dance with me.
Note that it even turns the TV on automatically. So it's just one button press.
Okay, so that's the demo video. If you could pause this so that this stays on the screen. Great, thank you. So there's the actual demo video is 20 minutes long, and it shows the whole setup process. And it's on a DVD that has the full installation with all the software and the source code on it. And I have a stack of spindles in the back, so if anybody wants to take the DVDs home with them, they can do that. Every step is shown in the DVD. Now, architecturally, what makes Linux MCE different is that it's not one program, but rather lots of different programs that are working together. This is really significant because all the different modules can wrap and encapsulate the functionality of various different open source software. For example, the PVR module is provided by MIFTV, but you can pull that out and substitute something else and you have the same user interface. The media playback was done by Xene, but in the new release, it's actually doing both Xene and MPlayer, so that sometimes when you're watching Blu-ray and HD DVD, it's coming off of MPlayer. When you're watching DVD, it's coming off of Xene. But for the user, it's just one user interface, one experience. Also, the way that it separates the remote control from the functionality so that you can use an IR remote or a web pad or use your mobile phone. All the remote controls work together with all the different pieces. The phone system as well is something you don't normally think of in a home theater environment, but it's convenient. It's provided by Asterisk, and now that can feed messages on the screen and you can control it with the same remote. So the key is that to the user, though, it doesn't look like a hodgepodge of disparate pieces like you normally would get if you installed lots of separate software. To the user, there's one UI, it's one common experience, everything works together like a cohesive whole. Now, what our focus is on going forward is we want to take particularly the media portions and the catalog and make it more tightly integrated into KDE. So right now, they are working together. You know, you can switch between the KDE desktop and the Linux MCE desktop back and forth, but a lot of the things are still happening separate. For example, Linux MCE's media catalog is completely separate and so forth. We want to make these things consistent and better integrated into KDE. And we also want to expose the same functionality on KDE's 2-foot desktop UI as on the 10-foot UI, so that if, for example, you want to browse your media catalog, you can do it with the keyboard and the mouse, and it's the same catalog as when you're in Linux MCE. Now, the main thing that we're working on is planning a next generation user interface with a very robust design tool. Our intention is to build this on the Qt libraries going forward. And the goal is we want to allow graphics designers to be able to create themes and skins and user interfaces that can be bolted on top of any other application when you want a 10-foot UI. So this is going to be a fairly unique approach. There's a lot of UI generation tools out there, but most of them are something like Flash, where they're designed to be standalone. You know, in other words, you run Flash, it's its own little application. What we're talking about is more the paradigm that KDE and Qt give you on the 2-foot desktop with the 10-foot desktop. If you're a developer who's creating, you know, a spreadsheet application, you don't have to take the time to create the X button to close your window and figure out how to navigate pull-down menus. That set of widgets exists for the 2-foot desktop. It does not exist for the 10-foot desktop. And so what ends up happening is that unless you're a big company like Microsoft that you can spend lots of money on Vista to have these floating, you know, pretty eye-candy rich 10-foot UI, for the rest of us, you know, especially in the open source community, most of the effort is spent on the core functionality, like if you're in Myth or you're in Xene, and the user interface, there's not as much resources to depend on to invest in the UI. So what we're looking at doing is making a user interface that can be linked into all of those products so that if you're a developer of an application like a Myth or a Xene, you can really focus on the functionality, your PVR or your video, and you'll have all of the tool sets for the user interface, just like you do with the 2-foot desktop. Let's see. So this also will allow them more time to focus on the core feature set. It'll allow to have more, you know, pretty eye candy and a more consistent user interface across all of those different desktops. Tomorrow, we're going to be hosting a little mini impromptu last-minute planned developers conference at a Sheraton hotel nearby to get this going. We're sponsoring bringing a few people out to discuss and to brainstorm how we should architect the software, how to organize the project, and to get things going and so forth. Our hope, though, is that this will be a big help to the free software because it allows, you know, where the free software really works the best, where the developers are the most skilled is in creating all of this broad breadth of functionality. And this allows them to focus more on that core functionality, and when we get this user interface tool built, the UI will kind of come along for it, and you have more time to spend on adding the features and functions that you want. And then traditional apps like Firefox, which you don't necessarily think of as being a 10-foot user interface, they'll be able to add one and make it more usable if you want to use it in a home theater environment or a home PC environment. So are there any other questions?
How much cost?
It's nothing. It's free. You can download it with all the source code. Yeah, all the source code's included.
Here, I'll give you the mic.
Yes, I have a question. I don't know if I should ask it, but why do you? Well, I'd rather re-ask the question. Why not support open source photo galleries like Gallery, for example, as opposed to Flickr?
Oh, that wasn't particularly a conscientious decision. It was just that there happened, we had one of the programmers that said find a place where you can get pretty pictures that has an API to make it easy to download and do keyword searches and so forth, and that was just the one they picked. I wasn't particularly involved in that decision. It just...
Is it easy to make it work with Gallery?
You just change there's a script. Right now there's a script, flickr.pl, you just change it to something else and, you know, you can pull it from another source.
You said you're using Myth TV for the PVR component?
Right.
I have Knut Myth running at home, and the user interface does not look like the one in the video? Is that just because I have an older version of it, or?
No, no, no. That's because the user interface that you saw in the video is Linux MCEs, not Myth TVs. So you have a little bit here already what we're promising, which is that Linux MCE has a common user interface that kind of sits on top of Myth TV and Xene and the other applications. So all the UI that you saw with the 3D scrolling, with the navigating your program guide, that's all Linux MCE. And what happens is Linux MCE is a socket-based architecture, so the UI is a separate application that is controlling Myth TV on the back end. Now, if you hit the menu button, you can bring up Myth TV's user interface and use it with the native UI too. So at the moment, you have both. What our goal is with this new UI is basically to develop it from the ground up under the GPL license in a full collaboration with the open source community, so that going forward, some people, when they want to create, let's say, a PVR application, rather than starting out with their own and then us bolting one on top, that we give them all the tools and the widgets to have this user interface built in. You know, just use these tools and widgets, and then coming along for the ride, you'll be able to control that PVR with your mobile phone. You'll get the follow me features, and you get all the other stuff that's built into the architecture.
I saw earlier how you flipped through the channels, looking at programs coming on and so on. I suppose you need to have a data source for that externally. And
Correct.
Are the formats for those same for all countries, or do you have to adapt it to different regions?
Well, that's actually not particularly our function. That's a function built into Myth TV. And so Myth TV includes schedules direct for the US market, and then there are various grabbers for the different countries. But to my knowledge, most of the world is covered. There's also, in the new release, you can switch, instead of Myth TV, you can use VDR, which is more commonly used in Germany, and it might be more popular in Norway as well, because it was really written just for the satellites around the Astra and Eutelsat satellite. So there's a new VDR module coming in the next release as well.
I can see there's the software here, but I don't understand what's behind it. Are you a business? Are you offering this as a free software project as well? Are you selling this into hardware?
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the ecosystem, please?
Okay. Well, I am actually not Linux MCE. I'm part of Pluto, and we don't have any formal connection to it. Linux MCE is an open source community project. The background is that Pluto is a commercial for-profit company. We make this suite of interoperable products that we then license to companies to embed into their products to make them interoperable and to add functionality. So we work with CE manufacturers, are mostly our clients, and we're in the software licensing business. We provide them tools. You may have even used some of the products or seen some of the products that have our software in it, because in general, when we license to a company, they strip off the user interface, and what you see doesn't look anything like this. They'll put their own, a completely different user interface on top of it. So that's our business, is we do the B2B. Now, what had happened is that for many years, Pluto had released all of our code to the open source community for download, but it didn't really take off, mainly because it was tightly embedded with our own distro. So you couldn't use OpenOffice with it. It was our own distro with our own version of X and our own version of Windows Manager that was really geared just for these set-top boxes and these commercial applications. And where Linux MCE came out is some people, volunteers from the open source community, said, let's take this and make it more usable for open source people. So they took the code and they adapted it so that it runs on Kubuntu. And that's what you see here.
So how tightly or loosely is Linux MCE coupled to any particular distribution?
Well, at the moment, it is fairly tightly coupled to Kubuntu. And the main reason is that it provides a lot of functionality that really gets under the hood. So for example, the way that the plug and play works, it's the way that I can take a Cisco phone out of the box and plug it in, and it pops up with the user interface and starts working, is because there's an add-on to the DHCP server that's monitoring IP requests around the home and is able to figure out when new devices pop on and off. And because everything is designed to be self-configuring, you take it out of the box and you plug it in, it has lots of hooks at the lower kernel level into Apache and to Asterisk and to all these other things. So it's not quite so easy to just take the code and compile it and make it run on different distros. The goal, of course, what we want to do with going forward with this interaction with KDE is take a lot of the more exotic features that are not of mainstream interest out and focus on the media cataloging, the user interface for the 10-foot GUI, and bring those into something that can be easily compiled and run across any distro so that you don't need to have it as part of this distro. So right now, the answer is Linux MC, really, you need to run it, you need to install it with that disk, which gives you Kubuntu. But going forward, we're intending to take a lot of that other stuff out and get something that you can just, is more lightweight, that you can move from desktop to desktop.
Now, I have another question. I own Neros OSD. Not sure if you're related with a piece of hardware.
No.
It's also a multimedia, kind of like a PVR, but it's just the interface. They don't sell the whole box with the whole storage device. But what I'm seeing, and I also own a Nokia N800, what I'm seeing is that all these embedded type devices are pretty much kind of like reinventing the wheel to an extent. But at the same time, they're creating their own little innovation, but doesn't get out of that environment. So, for example, the Neros OSD has a pretty well integrated YouTube browser in which it won't look at all like you're browsing on the web. It will just be type whatever you want to search and put play, and it will be displayed on the full screen with very good resolution. And that is something that the community created. It's GPL completely, and it will be really nice if there would be some kind of like bridges that I can easily redistribute all this innovation. On the other side, for example, I have a Nokia N800. They have a video center application which works like a remote that will interface with a kind of MythDB-esque like, although it's not MythDB. But on the flip side, when I asked them, how well could it work with MythDB? And I was like, well, if I have MythDB in my house, I will probably make it for that. But I don't have it in my house. So it's just these tiny little things that is stopping innovation and cross-pollination of technology between all these projects. And I wonder how difficult could it be to just make the bridge between all these projects.
Well, that is what our core business is all about. I mean, that's what our job is. We don't see ourselves as providing a user interface or any of the high-level functionality. It just, our focus is on this interoperability layer that allows pieces to play together. So the interoperability layer we created, it's called DCE, and in your case, what you can do is there's a web admin panel for it. You can say, I'm creating a new category of device, a WebPad or whatever you want. Check off the commands that it implements, the data it needs to be configured with, and the events that it fires, and then you run this code generator, and it builds a C++ application for you with a makefile for GCC and a project file for VS.NET under Windows, and it's pre-compiled with all of the stubs and the headers and put your code in here to make the whole thing work. So what you do if you want to take another, let's say that you have another PVR or something based on Nero, is you just go through and you add a new device template, you check off the same commands, data, and events that Myth has, click on generate, and it'll build you the C++ file that you can link into that application, and then you can just make the function calls. What our goal is with Pluto is the middleware market, where you're providing a user interface and a media player. That's a pretty saturated market. There's a lot of companies playing in that. What we're trying to do, which is something that other people aren't doing, is providing a lower level platform that allows the interoperability. So some of the commercial options that we're working on, for example, they're not even using our user interface or our media player. They're using something completely different. They may be built into a set-top box that's not x86 based. It may use a Sigma chip and doesn't have hardly any of our code in it, but what they do is they use the generators to create basically this wrapper that links onto their box, and it provides it the interoperability so that you can then control that box through other devices in your home. And then we also have what we call these logic modules that defines not only the communication layer, but how the functionality is supposed to work for a customer, for a homeowner. Like the functionality that if the doorbell is ringing while you're watching TV, pause the TV, display a little message in the corner, and let the user view the camera. That's like a functionality that's provided by the logic module, which is saying, find out these other pieces on the network that are providing these services. And one of our focus is, unlike say UPnP and most of the other protocols that are based on defining a protocol that you go to a manufacturer and you get to implement, our focus on interoperability is providing benefits and features. So for example, we support a wide variety of different protocols. Some of the stuff you see is happening with UPnP, some is happening with Bluetooth, some is Ethernet. We figure that from a consumer, you don't care what the protocol is, you just want to know that it works. And that, you know, if a burglar breaks into my home, I'm going to see the alert on my cell phone and I can scream at him to get away from my kids. That's what I want to know as a homeowner. I don't care whether it's talking UPnP or any of these other protocols. So that's what we're doing, is providing this interoperability layer.
I wonder what's the business model for Pluto in this. I mean, how do they expect to, well, benefit from this?
Well, there's two aspects to that. At the moment, most of the code that Pluto has provided in the logic modules, the core logic pieces, is under our own license, which is the Pluto public license, which is one that allows, it says it's the same thing as GPL, except if you sell it in prepackaged hardware, you have to come to us and buy a license. So that's why it's free for download. That's why we can give away the DVDs. You can add to it. You can derive works from it. But the catch is that if you're, let's say, Motorola, and you say, I want to build this into my set-top box, then they come to us and they get a license from us. Now, naturally, while there's a lot of people using it, it limits your ability to expand and move forward in the open source community, because in the open source community, if you're not GPL, you're basically evil. So what we're looking at doing is, you know, following kind of what Trolltech's example was, with this new user interface, we want to make all of the code under GPL. The business model for us will be that the user interface tools are GPL, but that the user interface, but when you want to link them to Myth TV and to Xene and so forth, it's not an issue because it's all GPL code. But that if you're somebody like Sony and you're going to embed this into a, you know, set-top box product, you're obviously not going to release your user interface and use of your graphics and your logo and your GUI to the public domain, and then we can do a licensing exactly like what Trolltech is doing. So the bottom line is right now, we have the Pluto public license, which gives us a business model because it ties the freeness to being distributed without hard goods. But going forward, this user interface piece we want to get more tightly integrated into KDE will be GPL with the same business licensing model as Trolltech has.
What kind of limitations does DRM place on limitations of your products or of Linux MCE? So you mentioned like Blu-ray,
right.
But I don't know if I can watch Blu-ray on a set-top box that runs Linux. I'm not sure that I can connect it to a cable provider's digital link.
Right. Well, I mean, obviously DRM is a big nightmare for everybody to have to deal with. But it is not, for the commercial applications, it's not an insurmountable one because all the licenses are obtained. I mean, we have commercial customers, and they don't put our software in an x86 box. It's going into a special box that has like a Broadcom chipset that has the trusted platform environment, although the licenses are paid and so forth. Now for Linux MCE, of course, for the free distribution, it's more complicated than that in that, you know, we don't ever give you libdvd CSS or tell you where to get it. That's up to the consumer to figure that out. We don't want to touch it. DRM, you know, there is always that issue for the free distro, but it's not a problem for us on our commercial side.
Okay. I've got a couple of
One question.
Two very small one. Okay. Practical question about hardware. So how cheap it is on resources, and how compatible is it with current hardware?
Okay. Well, our Achilles heel has always been video drivers. especially when you want to get into a pretty user interface that supports the compositing and the alpha blending, and you need good video quality, so the vertical sync has to line up. Unfortunately, you know, the general mentality of the video card manufacturers is that Linux is more for servers, and they put their effort into video playback on the Windows drivers. Now, at the moment, the NVIDIA drivers work pretty well. It doesn't have as good video quality like it does under Windows, and there's some vertical sync issues. But as far as a mainstream, you know, buy it off the shelf, it works. And as John from AMD is here, he will tell you that ATI is aggressively working on improving their Linux drivers as well. I understand they just recently have supported the compositing extensions, which will get you the nice, pretty alpha blending. So I can say for sure that the NVIDIA stuff works, and the ATI, AMD stuff.
Intel?
Every time we've tried it with the Intel video card, we've never been able to get the alpha blending and all the other stuff to work properly.
All right.
Ditto for VIA.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, everybody stand up and stretch because you've been sitting for a while. There's coffee over in the corner, and we'll reconvene in 14 minutes.